Hello, everyone. My name is Gitika Gorthy, and today I'm here with a very special guest, Miss Ames. Miss Ames is a payload operations and safety engineer at Maiden Space, where she works to improve operational and safety processes. In this position, Miss Ames will also command and control payloads on orbit. As a 2018 Brooke Owens Fellow, Miss Ames had the unique opportunity to work at Scaled Composites in California. As a flight operations intern, she worked closely with the flight crew to improve crew resource management and safety. With much experience and passion, Miss Ames is an inspirational space champion. I'm so glad to be able to conduct an interview with her today and have a conversation with such an amazing woman. Welcome, Miss Ames. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy schedule to talk to me today.
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to it and thank you for reaching out.
Yeah, so kind of before we understanding your journey that kind of led you to become a fellow and get you into working at Maiden Space, I'd like to know more about what your current role is and what a typical day at work looks like for you. I know it's probably a little different because of the virtual setting, but how does it usually run?
Yeah, so a typical day for me, my position entails two things, exactly as it states in the title, payload operations and safety. So the safety aspect it relies a lot for me on working very closely with our customer. Typically that's NASA. And just ensuring that the payloads that we're sending to orbit are safe for integration with the ISS and are safe for integration on the launch vehicles and return vehicles, and of course, safe for interfacing with the crew. So like I said, I work very closely with the NASA safety panel engineers to ensure that a number of aspects that they look at in payloads and flight hardware are safe and meeting specific requirements set forth by NASA before they get sent to launch and to the ISS and before the crew can interact with those payloads. When we get the payload up to orbit, then that's when I have to put on my operations hat and I work in our maiden base mission control room to command and operate those payloads. So in some cases, and most days I should say, I wear many hats. I do also help with systems requirements. So I also have to wear a systems engineering hat sometimes as well. So my day is pretty busy, really sporadic. It's just good to just be able to juggle a lot of different tasks, sometimes simultaneously.
Yeah, that actually sounds very exciting. I think one of the best parts about working in the space industry is to be able to have that diverseness and that challenge. It's not like a factory job where you're doing the same thing over and over again, but rather something that requires more problem solving and unique challenges and situations every day, which I'm sure you love.
Yes, actually, absolutely. That was one of my big things when I got the position. I was like, "Oh, is it challenging?" That's really important to me. It has to be challenging.
Definitely. Yeah. And when I was reading about your fellowship at Burgoyne's, I was like, I heard there were so many great things you do through the fellowship. And I was wondering, what is an amazing memory or project that you've worked on as a Brooke Owens Fellow that you're really proud of or you'd like to share with us?
Sure. So, gosh, I believe it was 2 years ago now already, and it's kind of crazy to think that it's already been that long. But 2 years ago, right after my year as a Brooke Owens Fellow, I assisted the fellowship with getting organized for the next year of Brookies, so our 2019 Brookies. And I volunteered to help host our summit event. So prior to the pandemic, we actually hosted our summit events in Washington, D.C. It was a week-long activity for all of the Brooke Owens Fellows to gather, meet each other, meet the founders, meet some of the mentors, and really get together and have a good time. But also, it didn't come without its own challenges. We, as Brookies at the summit, get together in teams, and we work to take all of our expertise in the industry and apply it to maybe solving some of the world's current issues. So it was a really great opportunity, but in particular, what I did was I helped organize that summit. So It was a lot, and, sometimes it was just, what seemed like really small details, like ordering food and making sure there was breakfast and lunch and dinner, every single day, and, again, those are seem like simple tasks, but, you have to take a lot into consideration, so, there was that aspect of it, there was the organizing, making sure that we had facilities to conduct the events at, the tables, things of that nature, and just the overall, like, logistics of everything, right? Like, how are we going to and from these events? How is everybody going to get here? Where is everybody going to stay? I was the point of contact, not just for the Brooke Owens Fellows themselves, but I was also point of contact for our guest speakers and for the many mentors that were coming into the event as well. So it was a huge, huge effort, and I can't say that I've ever organized an event before, but now it's a new skill set that I have. I can organize a large scale event, and I'm really proud of that because it ended up being successful. It went very smoothly, and it was just really rewarding to for everybody to have come and really enjoyed the event and grown from it, and know that um, you played a vital role in making that all come together.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with what you were saying. I think it sounds very exciting to be able to have that communication as well as that opportunity to meet other fellows who have those same interests as you. And conducting large events any day are very tough to organize. So I'm very glad that you had that amazing opportunity and experience through the fellowship. I'm also very curious if you've had any research study projects or anything in your undergrad or graduate school or something at your work even. Are there any projects or research opportunities that you have been through?
Yeah, so I currently hold two bachelor's degree. During my second bachelor's degree, I unfortunately did not conduct any undergraduate research. That time I actually just utilized to go through the Brooke Owens Fellowship and hold an internship. Now, in my first undergraduate degree, I studied aviation, and in that particular degree, I did a research project, specifically a literature, sorry, a literary review. Um, and I was looking at the over reliance on automated systems in the cockpit, especially during severe weather conditions. And that was a very interesting opportunity. And I did learn a lot. So even from a pilot perspective, I learned not to, over rely too much on the automation, but also trust the technology as well. That being said, while I didn't conduct any hardcore scientific research, it did help me, always consider things into different vantage points moving forward, especially with respect to human factors, which is actually what I continued to study moving into my second degree at Embry-Riddle, where I was studying spaceflight and human factors. And you know, I, I I don't utilize my aviation background that much, but I do think that research in particular still um, holds valuable. If nothing else, just learning how to do and execute research, even if it's just a literature review, it's extremely important to be able to search for, read through, and understand other scholarly articles and being able to cite and write, etc. It's a very important skill to have. Currently, in my position, I do not do any scientific research, unfortunately. Um, Most of that is done by our R&D team, and then they hand over that project, if it's promising, to our engineers to bring it to fruition. And then at the end of the day, I just make sure that that science is safe, and then I operate it.
Yeah, I think research in general is very important when you're especially an undergrad. So I'm glad to hear that that was a great experience for you. I hope to one day do research as well in a college with different professors to help me in facilities. So that's exciting to hear. And also, not everyone, when they get into their job, do research. And I feel like sometimes more than the research, just building and doing stuff is also very exciting. So glad to hear that.
Mhm.
Another thing that I'm really curious about is, did you
Yeah,
always imagine yourself in the position you are in today?
that's a great question. I cannot say that I did, but I often think that it's true that you envision a life for yourself And while you may still end up in the place you wanted to be, you don't necessarily take the paths you imagined taking. And that's okay. It's actually what keeps it exciting. That little bit of unknown. And to be honest, even a year and a half ago when I got this position, if somebody told me that if I went back to school that I'd be doing this job, I probably wouldn't have believed them. Because it's just such a cool thing to think about doing. What I will say is I've always known that I wanted to work in the aviation industry. Or sorry, in the aerospace industry. I've always had a love for aviation and for outer space. I think a lot of people in the industry could agree that ever since they can remember, they just loved everything about outer space. They were so intrigued by it and wanted to be an astronaut. And so I think, you know, I still ended up where I wanted to be. I'm in the industry. I definitely couldn't have ever imagined this being. But I will also say this: when I went back to Embry-Riddle, I remember family and friends asking, "Well, what job are you going to have when you take this random spaceflight operations degree? Most people just get an aerospace engineering degree or a biology degree or something, but this is a brand new, one of a kind program." And I just told them, I'll probably work in a position that doesn't yet exist. And that's kind of another thrill about this industry is that we're growing. And while there's certain positions that have been there since the start, like being an astronaut and rocket science, as we continue to progress and, become more prominent in the solar system and in our deep space explorations, there's always going to be a need for jobs and there's always going to be new opportunities that are being created as, those new opportunities are discovered. So, um, yeah, it's uh, very interesting the way things play out. But the important thing is just continue to know what your passions are and chase it, and you'll end up where you're supposed to be.
Yeah, I have never heard a story or a journey where someone said, "This is what I've always wanted to be." There's always twists and turns in a journey, and I feel like that's what makes it way more special, your story, to be able to share. And I'm so glad that you were able to, discover your passion. I know it's always intimidating trying to find a job or like in an area where you have no idea if you're going to find anything in that. So being able to take that risk is honestly very great. And I'm glad you were able to find a position that you are currently enjoying. And I think it's just to say to everyone that it's important that if you have a passion for something and you have a drive, and even if it doesn't already exist, it's something that's going to exist because of you, and not just following the normal path, but rather finding your own path is really important. So thank you for that.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So my next question is, how early were your passions identified? I know you were saying how a lot of your colleagues always wanted to be an astronaut, and I'm sure every little kid wants to be an astronaut. When did you identify that you loved aviation and space? And did they ever change or flutter over the time? Or did you have some sort of personal experience that helped you kind of get into the space industry?
Yeah. So again, I remember having this science book when I was in elementary school, and it had just a various number of topics from biology and plants and the solar system. And I remember always having the solar system being like my favorite section of this book. But in general, I just think I loved science in elementary school. Even just at the elementary level, you're writing science reports, and that's really it. You might write a hypothesis and that, but you're not really conducting any hard physical experiments. But I just remember always excelling at science and loving science. And then as I got older and I got into high school, I was like, well, maybe I'll do marine biology. I think that sounds kind of cool. And I'd always still been interested in astronomy and so forth, but for whatever reason, kind of forgot about it as a pathway that I could take. And then during my high school career, my sophomore year specifically, I went into one of those technical colleges where you, as a high school student, can take courses at the collegiate level. And so I was doing that. And I remember my English professor at this university made us read a book called Ishmael. And as a tangent to that book, my professor had given us a presentation on just how small we were in comparison to the rest of the universe. So first he showed us, a microorganism, and then an ant, and then us, and an elephant, and then our planet and our star, and another star, and another star, and everything just got bigger and bigger. And you just like, wow, I'm so small, I'm so insignificant, and the known universe is so like infinite that I was starstruck and I had to know more. So I decided right then and there, I was like, well, okay, I do want to study space. I need to know more. And it's been a journey ever since. So I actually started out at the undergraduate level studying physics and astronomy. And it turned out that I wasn't very good at calculus or calc-based physics. And so I think I gave that my best shot for 2 semesters. And it really ruined my GPA, and I was wanting to give it a third time because sometimes third time is a charm. And it wasn't that I was not understanding the material, it was just that I wasn't very good at testing on it. And I accepted the fact that maybe my brain just doesn't work that way. So even though physics makes sense, maybe it was the theoretical aspect of those courses that I was really struggling with, and that I can still work and enjoy a professional life in the space industry and not be necessarily a physicist. It also didn't help that the professors in that program said specifically that they could not help me. So, who wants to stay in a program where your professors don't want to help you, right? So I decided that instead of trying to take this course a third time and really just completely annihilate my GPA and get kicked out of university, that maybe I was ready to try something new. And I actually remember in middle school thinking that if I were ever going to join the military, I'd want to be a pilot. And so then I was like, well, you know what the heck? I know all of the courses at our school for aviation are filled with men. Specifically, they're usually sitting there in their military uniforms, and so for that for me was a little intimidating. But at this point, I didn't care. I was like, I would love to learn how to fly. Maybe this is the right track. I'm more of a hands-on learner. Again, the theoretics didn't really jive for me, and so I thought maybe um, this is another track. And just as a side note, as a kid, I'd always wanted to be an astronaut. And you'll hear astronauts time and time again say, well, what did I do? Or how did I decide what I do? And how did get here as an astronaut? And a lot of them will tell you that they looked to those people who are already in a position of being an astronaut. What did they do? What did their background look like? Just kind of take that, but also take it with a grain of salt, right? They did something that they were passionate about, and that's what got them there. And they went to school, they went to grad school, they got their PhD, or they were a military pilot, or they were a K through 12 teacher. So there's a lot of avenues that you can take to become an astronaut. And at first I was really hesitant to change my major. I was like, well, now I can't work in the space industry. And then I learned that that's not true. Astronauts are pilots. And so then I did that for a while. I did graduate from Eastern. I will say, finances and time to become a pilot are extraordinarily difficult. So I'm not a licensed pilot, but it's something that I still love to do. The fact that I even have, honed that skill set to fly an aircraft in itself is still pretty cool. And it's not something I have lost sight doing. But then I worked for a couple of years in the industry, specifically in the aviation industry. I worked for an airline, a cargo airline, working with the crew. And then I got kind of tired of sitting at a desk all the time. But again, trying to fly was difficult, even out of pocket. So I decided that the commercial space industry was starting to kick off. Virgin Galactic had come up, SpaceX had come up, and I just remember sitting there at my work desk thinking, what do I need to do to work at one of these companies, and how can I still be a pilot and maybe do this? And so then the thought maybe I'm a different type of astronaut. Maybe I'm a commercial space pilot and I fly the spacecraft for Virgin Galactic. Like that is now an option that didn't exist when I was going to school for aviation, right? So All of this to say, yes, I had a lot of tangential experiences. It was not a straight path from, I got a physics degree and then I got an aerospace engineering master's degree and then I got my PhD in that. For
Oh,
me,
wow.
that's never been the case. And I've just had to learn to accept that. And I've also learned to grow from my failures and accept that I'm not as good at physics or calculus as others, but I've still found my way into this this community and in this industry, and still making a significant impact and contribution to human spaceflight and just space exploration in general. So, very long-winded story. I'm still not done. I have plenty more aspirations. I would like to eventually go back to school and get my master's and my PhD. But I did want to have some time in the industry as a full-time professional and just building some of those experiences there, and then taking that back to academia and having more research, as you were asking. I really want to get some more hands-on research, and not just literature reviews, and just continuing my own path to maybe becoming an astronaut.
Yeah, that is so inspirational. I can't even tell you. So, the point of my series is to help people realize you don't have to be a certain someone or a certain genius in, calculus or a certain genius in physics or chemist. I think I want to show that, no matter who you are, if you have the passion for space, there is space for you, most literally. And I literally feel like your story perfectly captures that you don't have to be a physics genius or so good at calculus, like, calculus god. No, you literally could just love what you're doing. And aviation is a huge part of the space industry. And even from journalism to art, fashion design, everything counts in the space industry,
Yes.
even marketing and business. So being able
Hmm.
to, even if you're like in law, space law is huge. So being able to, as
Yes.
long as you have passion for space, you can combine it with anything, and as long as you have that drive, it's possible. And to hear your story, to see how it works, I feel like gives kids like me more hope that, oh, we can, like, go out of the conventional way and, explore more
Hmm.
paths based off of multiple interests. So thank you for sharing your story.
Sure. Yeah, and just to quickly add to that, I think if you even look at the astronaut candidates right now, sure, they some of them have some engineering background, some of them are still military test pilots, but they've also got a background in biology or chemistry or marine biology or astrobiology, like bio, what is the word, like botany or something like that. And then they have completely different degrees. So they could have biology and then they could have mechanical engineering and then they've got neuroscience as their PhD. And so they're really all over the place. And it just tells me that they went after what interested them in that moment of their life, but they took the time to become an expert in what they were passionate about. And that's what NASA is looking for. And again, it does have to do a little bit with like what they're looking for in a mission. But I think, again, as you and I were just saying, there's no like limit to what they're looking for in a mission, especially as we continue to get further and further out away from Earth. We're going to need everybody, right? It takes the village. It takes communications people because physics are not good communicators, right? So it's going to take everybody, and that's such an important thing that I like to relay anytime I give a talk and I tell my story, because I remember having those feelings of I'm not good at this, so I can never have that opportunity, and it's not true. And it did take me some time to realize that and accept it, but then I've also learned that it makes you, as a candidate, very unique, right? You didn't follow the straight path. You took all of these different turns, and sometimes you did something completely left field or 180 from what you were studying, and you found this way to make those trajectories like perpendicular, to still get you where you want to go. So that's the biggest thing I think, that especially young women in that who have an interest in working in the STEM community or the STEAM community for that matter, just know like you can do whatever you want and you can be passionate and do your passions, and it's still going to take you where you want to go. And that's the most important thing. Don't chase the money, don't chase the chase the end goal, but in the moment do what you're passionate about and you'll still get there.
Yeah, I think those are some powerful words. I know when I was a little kid, whenever someone would ask me, "What do you want to be?" I would just say, "I'm not sure, but I love biology." but I love space. And I didn't realize this till middle school that I love space that much. But when people would be like, "Oh, they're completely two different things. So how are you gonna pick?" And I never, so I was, always thinking, okay, so either I become something in biology or I could be something in space, but I never put those two together. And a part of the point that I'm bringing this series is to show kids that, you guys all have such unique careers that a lot of us don't even know about. And being able to see how you combined your passions is so important. And now, a few years ago, for 2, 3 years ago, I was like, okay, maybe I can combine this. And that thought came so late to me that I'm like, when I was little, I could just tell him when I wanted to combine it, but I couldn't even think of that. And so I'm sure a lot of people out there are like, oh, maybe I cannot go into space medicine or space law. And they're like, oh, either I have to be a doctor or a lawyer or be an engineer. I can never be both together. So I definitely think that, combining things together and following your passion is the key thing.
Absolutely. 100, 210%.
Yes. And I'm also curious, how did you become knowledgeable about the industry you're in, or how do you even keep up with the constantly evolving changes? Because I feel like every day I open social media or I read an article, there's, new discoveries every day. So I guess how do you keep yourself, updated?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I will say this. I'm a little guilty right now of falling off the face of the industry in the know plane. But before I really started getting so in depth with my own work, I had the notifications. I was keeping up with it that way. I would get the emails. But even before that, even before I started going to Riddle, and I was still just working in the aviation industry. For me, that was probably when I was doing the most, just reading and researching and just like whatever question came to mind, like just looking into it. You're right, somebody mentioned something to me and the other day, and it's kind of really stuck with me because I was doing this and I didn't realize what I was doing, right? So it's a little unhappy in my position in the aviation industry. So I think me picking up books and me doing that research and keeping up on those, as the commercial industry became very much more prevalent, that was me taking a piece of my passion and holding true to myself, even though I had to work this job I was no longer happy in until the right opportunity um, came for me. But yeah, I think even now, my interests are starting to change, and I found myself doing this again. Right, I'm taking these different books home on different subjects that have nothing to do with my job, and it's just me holding on to those passions, and absorbing anything and everything that is sparking my interest. And I think that can be said about the industry, right? You're consistently keeping yourself up to date and in the know. And I think in doing so, you're also doing yourself a service because, it's going to give you a better idea of those jobs or those paths that don't yet exist, right? So when I was keeping tabs on companies like Virgin Galactic, I said, they're just starting now. They're still startup-y, but it is Richard Branson, so he probably won't fail, or he will, but he'll persevere. And I see this being some aspect of the future of human space travel. And now we're here a few years later, and we're getting ready to send spaceflight participants
That's crazy.
on his spacecraft. And again, he's got positions out there that just probably wouldn't have existed. And I mean, even now, if you're looking at positions for the space industry, every day I see new opportunities coming up that probably would not have existed
Yeah.
even just last year. So it's insane, and I think the best thing that you can do is just continue to do your research, stay in the know. Like I said, I'm guilty of it right now. I'm preaching, or I'm the pot calling the kettle black here. I'm not as active and in the loop as I'd like to be anymore. But I think being in school is so much easier to keep in the know as opposed to when you start getting out into the industry and you're really, really busy with your work. But being in academia is probably the best time to always know what's going on in the industry and making those network connections, networking with your classmates, networking with mentors, networking with your professors, and going to joining memberships like what is the IAAA, all of those. Like that is the best way to stay in the know, going to these conferences, doing your research and presenting your research at these conferences. I really miss that.
Yeah,
I've found myself feeling very like isolated from the industry almost, and it's weird, right? Because now you spent that
you're in the
time like
part of it.
imagining like being in the industry and and now I'm in the industry and I'm less doing the networking thing. Um, it was a very, very weird transition. But I still think that there are ways to stay in the loop in the industry. I've got plenty of coworkers that still go to these conferences and job fairs and things like that. So I'm hoping to start, being able to participate in that manner and being a face for our company going forward. But yeah, I would recommend to anybody that's at least in academia right now to start joining those different organizations and going to conferences and things of that nature. It's the best thing
Yeah,
you
of
can do for
course.
yourself, and it's amazing, and when you're not doing it, you miss it, so
Yeah. Yeah. Did you have a specific like internship or some sort of volunteer role or something that helped you kind of stay in current with the skills, but also maybe helped you pursue your dream?
yeah, so, I think along the way, I've picked up a lot of different, volunteer opportunities and, memberships from different organizations, so for me, I would volunteer at local, like, air and space museums. I actually ended up working at space camp when
Okay,
I first
cool.
graduated from my first degree. So that was really fun and interesting and not your typical like graduate, get your big girl job. So I did do that for a little bit. Um, but yeah, I like I said, I would join little local organizations, and then Women in Aviation was another great one. So we would have a local site, but then you could go to the national conferences. Um, when I went to Riddle, again, I was a little bit more invested in just doing my fellowship and my for that program because I already had a bachelor's degree. I was only there for a year and a half to finish this
Mhm.
program, so it didn't give me too much time to really invest in a research project or join these organizations. Um, Not to say I couldn't, because I definitely could have. Um, but yeah, so there's plenty of aerospace organizations. There's oh boy, what is it called? SWE, so the Society for Women Engineers. That would be a great one. Actually, when I went to Riddle, I had gone to one of their like opening meetings to just kind of get an idea of what they were about. Unfortunately, I got a little bit more carried away with work, um, but there's plenty of opportunity. Um, and I think the biggest thing that I got out of uh, my second degree was getting into the Brooke Owens Fellowship and getting this internship. That was something I didn't actually get to have in my previous degree. And I think that having that industry experience at the academic level is a big like thrust into your first career once you graduate. So it's
Yeah.
great experience. But even joining school projects, so I did join some school projects. I helped a little bit as a project lead for a um, lunar rover challenge that they actually hold down at space camp at the U.S. Space and Rocket Center in Huntsville, Alabama. So I did help with that. Our program in particular had a spacesuits lab. So getting acquainted with your professors and knowing what they are doing in their research and their labs and any other project opportunities that they might know coming up by NASA or any other organizations for that matter. It's really important.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like having that ability of communications and networking is so important. And through a fellowship, they provide you so many opportunities with organizations. It's really hard for just an undergrad student to be able to get. So I definitely agree that fellowships are really important. And being able to seek out volunteer opportunities in your community is key. I know nowadays
Mhm.
people are starting to understand the importance of space in a broader way, so they're getting into there are more school opportunities for students to get involved in space. So I'm glad for that.
Mhm.
Um, And to kind of get into more of the space aspect, I'm really curious to know about what are some things or what is something that you're excited about and something you're nervous about in the space industry that you're looking forward to, but you're also kind of a little cautious.
Yeah, so I think the thing that I'm most excited and cautious about is the advancement of human spaceflight. It's something I'm extremely passionate about, and if as I continue my career, that's where I think I really want to contribute is to the science of human factors in space.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm really excited to see how that comes out. We've been seeing these futuristic um, images and artist renderings for years about what humans living and working in space is going to look like, and I'm really excited
Yeah.
to see how that unravels. There's certainly, again, doesn't come without some nervousness. The first mission is going to be a risky one, but that comes with anything. And the conquest of space is in some cases worth the risk of life. That was actually a quote that I learned from my favorite astronaut, Gus Grissom. And so, as astronauts, you learn to accept some of those risks, and you go anyways. And so I'm not necessarily nervous about that mission per se. It's still exciting. It's a new frontier. I think the thing that makes me nervous about the future of humans living and working in space is the responsibility that comes with it, and how we transition, not just as Americans or Russians or the Chinese or Japanese, but us as a species. We're going to be, you know, just totally expanding. The way of life here is going to be completely different there. Um, so you hear words like colonies and things of that nature, but are you going to have US colonies and Russian colonies, or are we going to have one giant compound where everybody is just living and working in space together? There are no borders, so it's that's what makes me nervous, because really it could go one of two ways, right? And even just from the very beginning of things with space policy and regulation, like, is it going to be an international global cooperation, or is it going to be every nation
Country.
for themselves, right?
Yeah.
And so it's very interesting. I think right now we've got a lot of really great leaders who all have common interests and all want the same thing, and we don't want to make the same mistakes in space that we did on Earth. Um, so yeah, it's interesting. It's still nerve wracking, and you just kind of have to put trust in humanity at some point, and hope that for example, space doesn't become a war platform. But you know, it's just, again, another risk that we accept could happen, and you can't really stop us from exploring and just trying to make, more discoveries, but also with those discoveries, you're making life better on Earth.
Yeah, I think it's definitely important to be responsible with the inventions we're going to make and the discoveries. I think it's definitely important to remember the rules and also remember to work together and collaborate. We've always collaborated in space explorations and missions and technology. So, keeping that sense of togetherness is, I think, very important. And to kind of wrap up the interview, I know I took a lot of your time, but to kind of wrap this up, I wanted to ask you, what advice would you give yourself um, if you could go back in time to your 10 years old self or something, 10 years ago even, what advice would you give to yourself and also to the young people watching who want to pursue in this, to go to the space industry or any industry in general? Like, what advice would you give from your experience so far?
Sure. I think that's such a great question, and a really important one. And I definitely think I've already touched on it. But again, just to reiterate, just know what you're passionate about, and do that. Become an expert in what you're passionate about, and don't let anybody steer you away and saying things like, well, there's no jobs there, there's no money there. Again, don't chase that. Like, the money will come no matter what you're doing. You know, for just an example, right? Growing, aspiring artists is a great example. You're living in New York City and you're broke and you're paying an extraordinary amount and you're just making art. But when you're good at it, and you're passionate about it, you can become a very successful artist. And I think that's just to be the same no matter what your job is, make that your piece of art, you know, make your passion your platform. You've got a blank canvas. Do with it what you want, and success will follow you no matter what. Um, yeah, and don't be afraid and to make those leaps. There's going to be a lot of scary decisions to make along the way, but just follow what you're passionate about. And like I said, I think the most important thing is do not listen to any negative outside sources try to scare you or steer you away from things that they think are impossible for themselves, but that's only up to you to decide what's impossible. So
Yeah, I think those are some amazingly strong and inspirational words to kind of end this interview. I think it's really important for every single person to remember their roots, their passion, and to follow it. I feel like everything just comes automatically if you just, have a goal and you stick with it till the end, ignoring the negative comments, and just always remembering that there are no boundaries to any industry, especially the space industry. Anyone could be a part of it. So thank you so much for sharing your journey and your story. Honestly, I really liked hearing how you overcame your failures, which really weren't failures, and how you took it in a positive light and actually ended up having an amazing career now. So thank you so much for taking your time to be here today and talk to us.
yeah, I'm really happy to share my experiences, and I'm really grateful that you reached out. Feel free to reach out should you have any other questions, or if you need any other helpful tips, tricks, etc., along
Yeah,
your
of
own
course.
professional path.
Yeah, I'll definitely reach
All
out
right,
to you. I will
well,
definitely need a mentor. So thank you.
yeah, of course. Well, you have a great evening and good luck with the rest of your interviews.
Thank you. Bye.